Hello and welcome to Lesson 2 of our Excel Intermediate series. In this lesson we'll be focusing on logical functions. So let's take a look at what the agenda is and what our learning objectives are for today. So the good news is the first question that we're going to answer is, what are logical functions? We'll then take a look at three simple logical functions which are probably the most common and certainly in my experience the most useful logical functions, and they are and, or, and not. We'll also explore how to combine these logical functions with the if function to produce meaningful output from our logical tests. Within the context of that exploration, we'll also take a look at how to concatenate text and cell elements. Now, concatenate is a complicated word which just means adding things together. So let's get started with what are logical functions. In simple terms, logical functions allow us to test our data versus defined criteria. We've seen in earlier lessons how use of the COUNTIF and SUMIF functions allow us to specify certain criteria and do a sum or a count based on that criteria. Well, logical functions allow us to expand on that functionality by looking at multiple cells and specifying different criteria for each cell and then making a decision based on that criteria test result. This may sound quite complicated, but once we get onto the Excel sheet and you see some examples, I'm sure it will become obvious how to use these powerful features. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead and open the register sheet from the earlier tutorials. If you haven't got that, you can download it from the GitHub link scrolling across the bottom of the screen now. So I'll just give you a few minutes to go and do that, and when you're ready, join me back. Feel free to pause the video as you're doing it. So now we have our register sheet open once again. Let's have a look at the three logical functions in turn. Let's start with probably the easiest one to understand, which is AND. So let's go ahead and just type in AND in this cell up here, cell G6, just so that we can track exactly what we're doing and where. So what AND does is it tests for conditions in a number of different cells, and it reports back true if all of the conditions that we have specified are indeed true. So let's give an example. So if we say equals and, then open the bracket, and let's say we want to test to say someone is in class A, for example. So we would click on the cell within the class column, specify our condition, which is that it equals speech marks A speech marks, place a comma to place another condition. And let's say we want to test whether they attended, for example. So click in the attendance column, and we'll set the condition for that column to equals speech marks yes speech marks, and then set another comma to set another criteria. And you can keep going on setting as many criteria as you want for the AND function to test. But we're going to make the last function for the test score. We're going to vary a little bit what we do here by testing that it is greater than a certain value. So we'll click in the test score column and we'll test that it is greater than 50. So what we're going to look at here is we're going to look, is the class A, is the attendance yes, and is the test score greater than 50? And if all of those conditions are true, the AND logical function will return true. And there we see it, the AND function has returned true. And if we copy this formula down, we can see now that for each of the conditions now, we can see that it's testing whether in this row, is that true, is that true, is that true? And here we see a false, and that's because the test score is less than 50. And we see falses for all of these results here from row 13 downwards, because none of those people had an attendance of yes. So the AND function tests a number of different functions, criteria, and reports back whether they are all true or not. And if they're all meeting the criteria, the AND function reports back true. So this is super useful if you want to test a range of different cells and numbers on whatever sheet that you've got in, and you want to do something based on them all meeting certain criteria. I think now what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of conditional formatting on these operations as we do them, so it'll be much easier to see whether a value is true or false, and we can compare them across the different logical functions. So if we go ahead and we just highlight this column, Control Shift and down, go into our conditional formatting little down arrow, select New Rule, and format only cells that contain. We've covered this before in an earlier beginner lesson, but we'll go over it again. We're going to set cell value equal to true. And we'll set format for a true cell to be this nice light green colour here. OK, and OK again. There we go, we've turned everything that's true into a green cell. And let's just do the same for the false cells, but we'll give it a different colour. Cells only that contain a cell value equal to false. Whoops, put it in caps. We'll format that as a red colour. And apply the changes. There we go. This helps our trues and falses stand out much better. So let's now take a look at the OR function. So once again, we'll just put it in this header here on rule. And what the OR function does is, again, it will look at multiple conditions and it will see if one or the other is true. So let's put that one in. Equals OR, open our brackets. And let's first see, for example, whether someone is in class A or class B. So in the class column, we'll click on the first cell and we'll specify that that's equal to A. We'll place a comma again to go for our next test. And this time we'll click on the same cell again, but we'll put in equals speech marks B, speech marks, and then close the brackets. So we're going to look to see if the value in this cell is an A or is it a B. And if one of those conditions is true, it will say true. So there we go. We've got a response back of true. And again, if we copy this formula down for the length of the table, we can see that that is true for all cases because a person is either in class A or class B. But if, for example, we go down here to row 15 and we change the A to a C, we can now see that that value within our OR test is changed to false because the value in that cell is neither an A nor a B. So the OR condition can be specified over much more than two cells, the same as the AND condition. So I think once again we'll just make this a bit more visible by copying our formats from this cell here where we set the conditional formats. So if we just pick that range again, we can right click, copy, and we can paste it over this range very quickly by just right clicking and selecting the format option here in the paste options, which is just a paste formatting. It looks like it's got a little percentage on it and a little paintbrush. There we go, and that will paste the same conditional formatting that we had in column G into column H. And again, it just helps us distinguish our trues from our falses. The final condition, logical function, that we're going to look at is the NOT function. So again, we'll just type that there into this row just as a header. And we'll go ahead and we'll type it just in a second. So the NOT function tests whether something isn't the case. So is the attendance not yes, or is the class not A? And you can only specify one parameter within this. So let's just type equals not, open our bracket, and we'll just do it for attendance. And let's test that the attendance is not equal to yes. So we can see there, it's false, because it is equal to yes. And we will see here now for the no's, it will come back a true because they are not yes. So it's like kind of producing the reverse. And once again, we'll just copy our formatting across here in the same way as before, just to help make our data a bit more visual. So the not function is often useful to combine with the other functions like and or. And let's have a look at examples of that now. Let's first begin by putting in a couple of extra columns just next to where we've got and or so that we can see the not equivalents of them directly next to them. So let's insert a column just at column H, and we'll insert another one just in column J there. You can see now that these cells have formatted themselves as red, and that's because of the conditional formatting that's being carried across. That will change once we have some values in there. So let's first look at the not and. So what we're going to expect to see here is basically not will produce the reverse of whatever we tested in our and test. So let's just make that really obvious by if we click on cell G7 here where we've got our first and logic. And if we highlight that in the formula bar and copy it with Control and C. Now remember, whenever you're directly accessing anything in the formula bar, to press enter immediately afterwards. Otherwise, if you click on a cell on the page, it will start entering that into the formula. So let's just press enter. And in our not and box here, in column H, again, you'll just click in the formula bar, and now we'll paste that formula in. So we've got a duplicate now of the formula that was in G7 within H7. What we're going to do is encompass this formula within a not statement. So if we just go after the equals sign and we type our not, we open a bracket and then go to the end of the formula and close the bracket. So this is now going to produce basically the reverse of whatever the and statement tested for. And there we see, in the first one, it's produced a false result. And if we copy this down, we can see that in every case, it's producing the opposite result. So it's testing the and reverse, basically. So if all three of those things are not the case. So let's now look at doing the same thing with the or function. So testing not or. And we'll do the same thing again. We'll go into our cell that has the or formula in it. We'll copy it from the formula bar with Control and C. Remember to press enter. Go into our not or column here and paste it in. And we'll do the same thing here. So immediately after the equals sign, we'll type not, open a bracket, and then close a bracket at the end of the formula. And you can see, once again, the not or version has produced the opposite result to what the original or test did. And if we copy that all the way down the table, we can see that that's true in each case. So whenever we have a false, it's true. Wherever it's true, we have false. Now this table of true and false values might not look that useful just on its own in isolation. But what we can do is we can combine the results of those logical tests with the if statement to produce an output based on what we observed. So let's have a look at doing that. So remember, in column G here, where we were using the AND function, we were testing to see whether an individual was in class A, whether they had attended, and whether their score was more than 50. Now I think for what we want to do here, whether they're in class A or B does not matter. So let's just remove that from this formula to begin with. So click in the formula bar, just after the first column, after the speech marks here, so first comma rather, not column, and just backspace over that, and then re-enter the formula. So now we're just going to test whether they attended and whether they scored more than 50. And let's press enter, and let's just click on that cell and drag that formula down to the bottom. There we go. So now let's go across to the end of this true-false table, and let's type equals if. So the first thing the if statement asks us for is a logical test, so we can see that highlighted here in bold. It's now blue because I'm hovering my finger arrow over it. And the logical test that we want to see is what we have in cell G7, so we're just going to click G7. Now, If you're testing to see whether a logical test is true, you don't have to specify equals true. So, for example, we could type G7 equals speech marks space true speech marks. But you don't need to do that. If you're testing if it's true, you just need to say if the logical test. And we'll put a comma in. And the next thing it's going to ask us for is what value do you want to produce if that test is indeed true? So let's put in something like nice. So, the person attended, the person scored more than 94. So we're going to, give them a bit congratulations. So let's open up some speech marks and put in some text. So we can say, well done. Now, what would be really nice here is, if we could respond back the person who we said well done to, and we can do that by concatenating, which is basically adding text elements together within this response. So we first need to specify which parts are strings and which parts are not strings. So a string is a series of text characters, which this well done is. So let's just put a space after it and close our speech marks. Now, if we want to add something to this, we need to put in the and sign. So that's shift number 7 on a standard PC keyboard. And now we can specify a cell. So let's specify Adam's name. So Adam. And then we'll put in another and because we want to put some text after this. And we'll say, well done, Adam, of class, put another space, close our speech marks, put the and symbol in again, and give the class. So this is going to say, well done, Adam, of class A. Or if somebody's in class B, it'll say B, or it'll report back their name. So this makes it much more personal, the response. So this is the value that we want if it's true. Now we're going to put in a comma. And now it's going to ask us value if false. Now we're not going to complicate this, we're just going to put in speech marks, try harder. Close our speech marks and then close the bracket. So again, just to reiterate here, so if the condition that we've produced in our AND test is true, we're going to tell the person well done and from which class they are. And if it's false, they're going to get a try harder message. So let's just press enter. Let's just open that column of column M and N. And there we go. We can see well done, Adam of class A. Now we missed a space before the of here. You can see the Adam and of are together. And if we look in the formula, we can see, yes. So here we didn't put a space before of class. So let's just go and do that in the formula bar. Press before the of, put a space in, press enter. And there we go. And then if we copy this down, we can see there, for wherever somebody has attended and scored more than 50, they've got a well done message and it tells you what class they're from. And wherever that's not the case, so wherever we've got a false in our AND statement, we've got a try harder message. And you can use that kind of format of the if statement and a logical test to produce whatever output that you want in response to that test. What you could have also done was, instead of having the formula actually within a separate cell, you could put this formula here after the if statement. So just see there in the formula bar where we've got G7 now, which is where the formula test is. You could put that formula in there. Now, but what you'll find is if you start doing that, your formulas will start to get quite long and complicated, and it will be difficult to understand and read them. So when you're starting out, I think it's probably best to break things into small manageable chunks. So do the logical test first, produce an output of it, and then do something with that output, like an if test or whatever it is that you want to do. And that completes the basics of logical functions. Let's have a refresh on what we learned today. We learned what logical functions are and how to use them to test criteria in our data. We explored the three probably most used functions of AND, OR, and NOT. We combined these functions with the if statement to produce meaningful output from our logical tests. And within the context of that, we looked at concatenating together text and cell elements using the AND symbol and text strings encompassed in speech marks. So I hope you found today's content useful, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to get future episodes. And I hope to see you in the next episode.